Hello everyone. In this video, we'll discuss about French verbs. Verbs are very important as far as the formation of sentences are concerned. In French, there are two types of verbs, regular verbs and irregular verbs. Auxiliary verbs are also categorized as irregular verbs. Regular verbs are the ones that follow a typical pattern and rules for verb conjugation. We need to learn that specific pattern, and that is applied for all the regular verbs in accordance with the groups of those verbs. Then comes irregular verbs. These verbs are the ones which do not follow a specific pattern and rules for verb conjugation. So it's very important to memorize and learn each one of them. Auxiliary verbs. These verbs are also categorized as irregular verbs. And in French, there are two auxiliary verbs, avoir, which means to have, and être, which means to be. Auxiliary verbs are also known as helping verbs, as they help in the conjugation of compound tenses. These verbs are used with the main verb to show the verb's tense. In order to have a better idea about the regular and irregular verbs in French, let's have a look at regular and irregular verbs in English. In English, the regular verbs are the ones which create simple past and past participle by just adding ed to the present tense. For example, accept, accepted, call, called, answer, answered, help, helped, dance, danced. So here either ed is added or d is added. This is the particular pattern that you need to follow if you want to change a verb from present to past tense or past participle. So in regular verbs in English, it is very clear that you just have to keep in mind this specific pattern, and that will be applied to all the verbs, all the regular verbs. But if we talk about irregular verbs, it's quite different. There is no particular pattern as we have it in regular verbs. If you want to change the present one to the past and the past participle, we need to memorize different forms for different verbs. For example, we cannot say eat, eated, sleep, sleeped, go, goat. So there is no specific pattern that ed or d can be added to the verb. You need to learn all the different words that are associated with that particular verb. For example, eat, ate, sleep, slept, go, went, get, got, choose, chose. So you can see that all the 5 verbs are changed into the past tense in an entirely different manner. Not even a single verb has the same form or pattern if we compare it with the other verbs. So we just have to memorize and learn all the verbs, their past tense and their past participle, because they are all different and there is no specific pattern to learn that. That's why irregular verbs are a bit tricky to learn in comparison to regular verbs in both the languages, English and French. In French, there are 3 types of verbs: ER ending verbs, IR ending verbs, RE and OIR ending verbs. These are the 3 categories, or you can say 3 groups under which verbs are classified. These groups are divided into 3 groups and are conjugated likewise. First group, ER verbs. Verbs whose infinitives end in ER. For example, parler, regarder, présenter, appeler. So the first group verb comes under regular verbs, and they all are conjugated in the same manner except for one exception, that is LA, which means to go. Then the second group verbs, IR verbs. These are the verbs whose infinitives end in IR. For examples, finir, choisir, croisier, etc. These are also regular verbs as they are also conjugated in the same manner. There is a particular pattern that IR verbs follow. Then comes third group. Specifically, they are the RE verbs and OIR verbs. And all the irregular verbs comes under this category. There are some IR and ER verbs also, which are conjugated in an entirely different manner from the first group and the second group. They are called irregular verbs as they follow a different conjugation. For example, party, voir, venir, pouvoir, comprendre, avoir, etc. In French language, verbs are conjugated with aged subject pronouns in a sentence. As in English, we have subject pronouns. In French also we have, but with bit of variation. And the difference is that in English we have only one you, but in French we use two you, one for informal and one for formal. And in English we use only one they, but in French we use two, one for masculine plural and the other one for feminine plural. And if there is a group of masculine and feminine, then it will take the masculine form. So let's see how we pronounce the subject pronouns in French. Je, I, tu, you, which is used for informal, il, he, elle, she. These four subject pronouns are used for singular. Then nous, we, vous, you, which is used for formal, il, they, elle, they. All these four forms are used for plural. First one will conjugate the auxiliary verb which comes under irregular verbs. Avoir, which means to have. J'ai, I have. Tu as, you have. Il a, he has. Elle a, she has. Nous avons, we have. Vous avez, you have. Ils ont, they have. Elles ont, they have. Then the other auxiliary verb, which also comes under irregular verbs, that is être. Je suis, I am. Tu es, you are. Il est, he is. Elle est, she is. Nous sommes, we are. Vous êtes, you are. Ils sont, they are. Elles sont, they are. Now if we talk about the conjugation of ER verbs, that is the first group verbs, there is a particular pattern, as we have already discussed about it, that we have to learn. So what we have to do, ER verbs are the verbs which ends with ER. So we just have to remove the ER and then add these particular endings in accordance with the subject pronouns. With je, we'll add E. With tu, we add es. With il, we add e. With elle, we'll add e. With nous, we'll add ons. With vous, we add ez. With il, we add ent. And with elle, we add ent. So now this one, parler, which means to speak or to talk. So this is a ER verb because it is ending with ER. So what we have to do is we have to drop this er, we have to remove this er, then we are left with parle. So parle is the stem of this verb. So we are going to use this stem parle for with all the subject pronouns. And then with this stem, we are going to add these endings in accordance with the subject pronouns. You can see that the endings are marked with the blue color so that it will become clear to you that how we add the endings with the stem. So parle is the stem that we have written with all the subject pronouns, and then we have added the endings. Je parle, I speak. Tu parles, you speak. Il parle, he speaks. Elle parle, she speaks. Nous parlons, we speak. Vous parlez, you speak. Il parle, they speak. Elle parle, they speak. Then another example of a regular verb and er ending verb is habiter, which means to live. Here also we will remove the er and then we are left with the stem habite. And then we'll write this stem in the word throughout, and then we'll add the endings that are used for conjugation of er verbs. J'habite, I live. Tu habites, you live. Il habite, he lives. Elle habite, she lives. Nous habitons, we live. Vous habitez, you live. Il habite, they live. Elle habite, they live. Now the second group verb, which ends with ir. These verbs also comes under regular verbs, though there are a few exceptions in ir verbs also. So here again we'll drop ir as we have dropped er in the er verb. So this is ir verb, so we'll drop ir here. And then we'll add the following particular endings. With je we'll add is, with tu we'll add is, with il we'll add it, with elle we'll add it, with nous we'll add issons, with vous we'll add issez, with il we'll add issent, and with elle we'll add issent. So these are the endings that you need to memorize and that will be applied for all the ir regular verbs. You just have to add these endings with the stem you are left with after removing ir. So, finir. Finir means to finish. Je finis, I finish. Tu finis, you finish. Il finit, he finishes. Elle finit, she finishes. Nous finissons, we finish. Vous finissez, you finish. Ils finissent, they finish. Elles finissent, they finish. So here you can see that ir is removed and then we are left with the stem fin, fin. And then we'll write the stem with all the subject pronouns and then we will add the endings that is applied with all the ir verbs or all the ir regular verbs. Then comes another regular verb with ir ending, choisir. Choisir means to choose. Je choisis, I choose. Tu choisis, you choose. Il choisit, he chooses. Elle choisit, she chooses. Nous choisissons, we choose. Vous choisissez, you choose. Ils choisissent, they choose. Elles choisissent, they choose. So here also we have removed ir and we are left with the stem choice, and then we'll add all the particular endings that are applied with the ir verbs, regular verbs. Then comes the third group, that are irregular verbs. So here we have some re verbs, some oir verbs, some ir verbs, and some exceptions also. So here you will see that the verbs that we have taken for the conjugation are entirely different. There is no similarity in the conjugation of any third group verb. That's why it's quite tricky to learn this verb, because you have to memorize each and every, because as there is no specific pattern for this. So faire, which means to do or to make. Je fais, I do. Tu fais, you do. Il fait, he does. Elle fait, she does. Nous faisons, we do. Vous faites, you do. Ils font, they do. Elles font, they do. So there is no similarity if we compare it to the previous group verbs. Then another irregular verb. This is the only exception in ER verb which is conjugated in an entirely different manner. Otherwise, all the ER verbs are conjugated in the same manner. Aller, which means to go. Je vais, I go. Tu vas, you go. Il va, he goes. Elle va, she goes. Nous allons, we go. Vous allez, you go. Ils vont, they go. Elles vont, they go. Another irregular word, comprendre, which means to understand. It is also conjugated in an entirely different manner. Je comprends, I understand. Tu comprends, you understand. Il comprend, he understands. Elle comprend, she understands. Nous comprenons, we understand. Vous comprenez, you understand. Ils comprennent, they understand. Elle comprend, they understand. So this is also conjugated in an entirely different manner. Then another irregular verb, lire, which means to read. Je lis, I read. Tu lis, you read. Il lit, he reads. Elle lit, she reads. Nous lisons, we read. Vous lisez, you read. Ils lisent, they read. Elle lit, they read. So you can see this verb is also conjugated in an entirely different manner. So you can see that all the irregular verbs, there are different irregular verbs that we have discussed. They are conjugated in a totally different manner, and there is no similarity in the conjugation of these verbs. So you can see that there are a lot of difference between the regular and irregular verbs. It's quite easy to learn regular verbs because you just have to follow a specific pattern for ER and IR regular verbs, and that will be used and applied for all the IR and ER verbs. But if we talk about irregular verbs, we need to memorize all the verbs for the conjugation because the conjugation is entirely different. And I hope that after watching this video, now you're clear with the concept of French verbs and how regular and irregular verbs are conjugated and what are the differences between the first group, second group, and third group verbs. Thank you so much.